Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Connections podcast. I'm your host, Emmy Vadnais, and today we're talking about healing with spiritual communication and Reiki with Rebecca Austill-Clausen, who is an award-winning author and occupational therapist who has founded 4 private practices, including Austill's Rehabilitation Services, which grew to a staff of 375 occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists, servicing 13,000 clients per year. She has been president of the Delaware OT State Association, vice president of all the state OT presidents, and represented the Joint Commission in Home Health for the American Occupational Therapy Association, the American Physical Therapy Association, the American Speech and Hearing Association, and 3 national Therapeutic Recreational Associations. And in 1995, Becky had a spiritual transformative experience when she discovered her ability to communicate with her 37-year-old brother who had died. She became a Reiki Master and has been teaching Reiki to OT practitioners at the American Occupational Therapy Association's annual conference each year since 2015 at university medical professional programs and at state conferences. And before I forget, you can learn more about her at RebeccaAustill-Clausen.com. Welcome, Becky. We're so happy to have you here today.
Oh, Emmy, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here, and thank you. Just thank you very, very much. I'm delighted.
Wonderful. Well, we know each other because we're both occupational therapists, and with the Healing Connections podcast, the focus is very much on integrative health, wellness, and prevention for healthcare practitioners and anybody listening to this program. And recently, I read your wonderful book, Changemaker: How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. And can you share with us, how did this experience that you had with your brother and his illness and his passing, how did this wake up your life?
It's a great question, Emmy. Thanks so much for asking. You know, before my brother passed, I thought that we died and that's all there was to life. And now I've realized that life is eternal. And it's been such a realization. I had never thought about what my purpose was on life, why we're here, what we're supposed to do. And I realized that we're spiritual beings living in a physical body. And it's been a glorious realization. And so that's my overall big picture understanding from what happened when my brother passed.
Yeah, and clearly those who are interested, definitely, we're going to talk more about what happened in this book, but to get a full picture, definitely check out the book. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think that it's something that a lot of people don't realize, that they can communicate with loved ones, and certainly grief can be overwhelming for so many. And I believe it was over 20 years ago when this all happened. So tell us a little bit about, my understanding is that your brother shared with you that he was ill. He also didn't really want you to share with any other family members because of maybe the kind of disease he was having. And at the time you self-described as being a workaholic. So can you take us through just a little bit of that moment of your life and what your life was like having that experience with your brother and how it started to transform for you?
Absolutely. Thank you again for asking. My brother passed of AIDS, and he had come out when he was in his early 20s, and it was when people were dying of AIDS. And so we were just casually walking along the beach, and I casually said to him, "Hey, David, have you been tested for AIDS?" And he looked away, and it was the longest 10 seconds of my whole life. I didn't expect him to say anything except for yes, and I'm fine. And when he turned back, he said, "Yes, I am HIV positive." And I didn't know what that meant. And I said, "Well, what's that mean?" And he said, "Well, that leads into AIDS." And at the time, AIDS was a killer. There were thousands of people dying all the time. And I said, "Well, David, are you getting good medical care?" Which he was. He had the best medical care. And so he asked me not to tell anybody. He was very, very careful about who he was with, and he didn't want to be treated any differently. And so what happened, Emmy, was that I found myself unable to communicate with even my husband, Jeff. And so I ended up at bookstores, and I didn't know anything about psychic reality. I wasn't what I considered spiritual. I knew no one that believed that life continued after death. And I found myself reading all these afterlife communication books, and I would become friends with the authors, meaning that I found an author that I thought would be professional and respectful, and they had an interesting story, and I would read their books from the very first one they wrote. And so by the time David passed, I at least had an awareness that there was a potential that we could communicate. But for 6 weeks, I was filled with grief. And a lot of times when we have grief, we can't feel anything except for the sadness. And 6 weeks later, it was right about this time, actually, it was early November. I was riding my horse through a Christmas tree farm, and it was a beautiful day, and we had had our first frost. And I said, "Thank you, universe, for this beautiful day." There were rainbows sparkling on the icicles, and it was lovely. I closed my eyes, and there was my brother. And Emmy, it was the most profound experience of my life. He was in human form, wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. And I didn't know anything better than talking with him. And so I started to talk, and within a second, I realized I could just share thought. And he was great, and I was great. And I looked behind him, and they were my grandparents who had passed, holding hands like they always did. There was Edward, David's best friend, our childhood friend, who had passed, a friend of mine, Holly, who had passed, and 24 other people. And the story goes on, but it was the first time that I realized that life continues forever. And that absolutely has changed my life. It's been phenomenal. And I wanted to learn how to continue doing this. And so I went to the library. This was 23 years ago. The internet really wasn't a factor. And I don't know what I expected to happen, but I was walking up and down the corridors. I had nothing that I was looking for, and that didn't really work. And so then I went to a health food store. I was trying to find something to teach me how to communicate with David again, and that didn't work. And it was the first time I realized I needed to ask for a teacher, ask for assistance, and trust that it would be provided. And a couple of weeks later, a friend of mine who's an occupational therapist, Dr. Amy Carroll, who now is teaching at Thomas Jefferson University on the faculty, she was working with me at the time. And she came in and she said, "Becky, how are you doing?" Well, I didn't share any of this. And I said, "Well, it's rough." And she said, "I met someone that I think you'd like." And I'm like, "Well, who's that?" And she said, "She's a shaman." And I said, "Well, what's a shaman?" And she said, "A shaman believes that everything in life that's natural has energy." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that sounds interesting." And she said she lives in Reading, Pennsylvania. Now, Reading, Pennsylvania is sort of a urban city, town area. I thought shamans lived in Brazil or Peru or whatever. And I ended up apprenticing with Nancy Ariel is who the shaman is that trained me. Just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I apprenticed with her for 3 to 6 hours a week for that first year, and it was absolutely glorious.
Yeah, thank you so much for walking us through. So you had your brother and other family members visit you in a human or in a physical form. I mean, that must have been, how was that for you in that moment? How did you feel? What was going through your mind? I mean, what were you mostly just grateful? Was there any part of you that was fearful at all, or?
Emmy, I was filled with joy.
Yeah.
There was no sense in being scared. It was my brother.
Yeah.
I could feel his energy. I could see him. He was a little bit younger than he was when he passed. He was healthy. It was David, and there was no doubt in my mind that he was alive. It was fantastic. You had asked about other family members. Recently, well, a couple of years ago, both my parents passed. And, Dad was always a philosopher and a thinker. And so when he passed, and I was actually able to see a lot of this ascension, I said to Dad, "Hey, Dad, how is it where you are?" And he said, "Becky, it is so fantastic. There is no limit to the amount of directions or areas that I can pursue. I have an unlimited amount of time. There's no time where I am. And so instead of pursuing all sorts of different things, I'm just going to be." And I thought, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And, my mom, when she passed, she had very severe chronic pain for 13 years. And it was tough. She had a tough last couple of years. Well, actually, it was a tough 13 years. And I didn't I didn't hear from her. One time when she passed, like immediately, she said, thank you. I was there a fair amount. And then I didn't hear from her for 6 months. And then my husband was doing a puzzle. So this is 6 months later, after Mom passed, hadn't heard from her at all. And he's doing a puzzle. Mom always used to do puzzles. And all of a sudden, I hear Mom's energy. I hear her voice in my head. And she goes, the piece goes right there. And I'm like, oh, Mom, how are you doing? And Mom is very focused. And she didn't say anything. She just says, the piece goes right there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Jeff, Mom's here and we need to put the piece there. And Mom has ended up coming so many times, and she transforms into a bird. She loves birds. And when spirits or our loved ones transform, a lot of times they'll assume the characteristics of an animal, or work with electricity, change lights or whatever. And these birds that Mom becomes come right up to us. And I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And I can always tell when it's Mom, because the bird acts very, very familiar to me and has unbird-like characteristics. Plus it has Mom's energy. So it's been fantastic. I had no psychic spiritual experience before this, and it's been excellent.
So I want to say, I'm sorry for the physical loss of your parents. And does that still feel relevant to someone like you who's able to communicate with a loved one or connect with that energy even before they physically pass?
Good question, Emmy. Yes, it's still relevant because we're living on the physical plane and they're living in another realm, whatever you want to call it. They're in an afterlife realm. And so yes, I miss them a lot, but I definitely don't miss them as much as people who have not learned to communicate with their loved ones that have passed on. Yeah. So yes, it is relevant, but it definitely is not as sad, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, I am sorry for the physical loss of your brother and your parents, but it sounds like all that you've learned and now teach, did that make it an easier transition, or I mean, you don't know because you wouldn't have, it was only your first time of having your parents pass, but did it seem like it made it a relatively less painful experience, do you think, somehow?
Yes, it absolutely does. And I mean, grief is so hard to surpass. But there are techniques and there are ways that we can master our grief and move on. And learning how to communicate with our loved ones has been a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. And so yes, it's been wonderful. Holidays are tricky, because you always remember holidays with your parents or your brother or your sister or your loved ones or your grandparents or whatever. So those are hard. Yeah. But, there's all sorts of loving rituals and remembrances that we can do so that we can remember them, and then to have the ability to communicate with our loved ones, which I fully believe anybody can do. It's not just me, because it just happened to me. I was ready, but we need to believe and we need to ask. And I fully believe it'll happen.
Yeah, and that's from several experiences I've heard over the years, at least for me, a rare experience that I've heard where it was like they were in physical form. They're right in front of you. Some people maybe might hear something faintly or see somebody in a dream. Very profound. So it sounds like you then, I don't want to give too much of the book away. So we, let go wherever you would like to go with this, but so you had an experience where some people might just start taking classes or wanting to learn how to do this. You had an experience, but it was maybe hard to get that experience back. So you started working with a teacher who taught you how to do this. Is that what happened for you?
Actually, yes, essentially that is what happened. Although what Nancy did for me was really validate that I was communicating with my brother. She had communicated with lots of people that had passed on and had communications with lots of spiritual entities. And she acted like it was just the most normal thing on earth. And so for me to have somebody normalize this process was very, very validating. So we didn't have like after death communication courses. She actually started giving me Reiki, and we went on shamanic journeys. And so a lot of the way I do this is through shamanic journeying. And with shamanic journey, you actually travel to different realms of existence, and you may or may not meet people or entities on the way. But that's how I learned how to do it.
Yeah, and it's Nancy, what a beautiful teacher, and how fortuitous that you recorded some or many or all of those sessions, so you were able to actually put quotes and dictate really beautiful messages. And I think that's one of the things I really love about your book, is not only does it share your story, but it teaches people how they can do this as well. So you had it spontaneously happen, maybe because who knows, right? Like, who knows? Like you said, you were ready. And then you met with this teacher to maybe understand what was happening or learn how to work with this more. And so what did she share with you, or what do you feel she helped you the most with around your brother's passing, being able to communicate with him, or anything else that has led you to where you are today?
I love your questions, Emmy. They're so interesting. Nancy validated my experience and encouraged me to continue pursuing. And I trusted her. And when we have a teacher, I think that's the most important thing, is that we trust what we're gaining, what we're learning. If we don't trust the teacher, it's going to get skewed. And so I learned really fast. And what Nancy used to say, she used to say, Becky, you've done this before. And I'd be like, well, what do you mean I've done this before? And she taught me about past lives and the fact that we very well could have known each other in a past life, which is why we had such an easy connection. And when you start to think about life being eternal, it really does change one's perspective about how we're living on this earth. And so I very much want to live a mindful, purposeful life filled with love. And love is very positive. It has positive energy. It facilitates positive action. Love facilitates positive reactions. And so why would I want to be worried about this? Because I was having these glorious experiences, and they were unusual, no question about it. They were unusual. I didn't know anybody else that this was happening to, but it felt right. And I'd never felt so at peace in my entire life.
Beautiful. So Nancy validated you. Yeah. And isn't that so important for all of us to be seen and be heard, and not thought of as being odd for experiences that we have? Because even though, you know, your experience might be different than somebody else's, many people are having these types of experiences or want to have these types of experiences. So you mentioned that some of what you did with Nancy was shamanic journeying. Could you describe what that is and what that was like for you?
Sure. The very first time I met with Nancy, that first hour, you had mentioned that I recorded everything except for that first hour. And I wish I had that first hour, because that's really where I thought, all right, this is my path. So after that first hour, Nancy said, Becky, would you like to go on a shamanic journey? And I said, yes, I'd love to go on a shamanic journey. I had no idea what that was. And so what happened was I laid on her massage table, and I was on my back, and she started to move her hands around, and I had my eyes closed, but I could feel something. And so I'd sort of peek open, and she'd be moving her hands. And actually what she was doing was using Reiki energy. She was clearing my chakras. She was having me be ready to have a shamanic journey. And a shamanic journey, the classic form of shamanism, is that there's 3 different levels. There's the lower level, which is like below earth. There's the middle level, which is earth. And then there's the upper realm, which is above earth. And so she said, Beck, we're going to go, if it's all right with you. Everybody, she always asks permission. If it's all right with you, we're going to travel to the upper realms. And it was a magnificent journey. And I met a wonderful spirit animal. It was a raven, actually, that brought me up to the different realms, and had a glorious experience. I had the second most profound experience of my whole life. The first one being when I learned how to talk to David, and it is fantastic, and it's safe. There's an idea sometimes that if we go exploring that it may be uncomfortable, or we may be fearful, or it may be scary. But as long as we ask for our highest good, we always want to ask for our highest good to be received. And sometimes people say it's good to surround ourselves, just visualize ourselves with a white light that covers us while we're asking for our highest good. It is a safe form of communication, and the amount of information that we receive from the afterlife is absolutely astounding. It's been glorious.
Wonderful. And who doesn't want more peace and connection and love? So, and that's a central theme as well, is love. That seems to be, I believe love is the greatest healer. You would probably agree. How has love grown in your life since that time? I mean, I keep thinking about you saying that you would wake up so early in the morning, Becky. Do we want to tell people how early? I mean, do you still get up that early in the morning?
Yes.
Okay, you're an early riser.
Well, yes. I mean, I haven't woken up as early as I did this morning, but I was all excited and I had lots of things to do. So this morning was like a regular 3:30 in the morning, wake up, go to work. And at the time, it was a little bit earlier. It was like either 2:30 or 3 o'clock or 3:30. But I get a lot of work done before like the day starts. And it always makes me very happy because I love what I do. Love is a central theme. It's so wonderful to use love in a healing capacity. I've even started, I don't do it all the time, but I've started to talk about love and sign my name Love in many emails. And professionally, we don't talk about love. We're supposed to have these boundaries and we don't talk about love, but Reiki actually is considered unconditional love. And to live in this loving environment is just fantastic. And again, positive thought breeds positive action, and love is certainly positive. And what happens with Reiki is that Reiki raises our vibrational level. And so we're able to continue a sense of love, because love is a higher vibration. And so when we're communicating with loved ones, or we're trying to facilitate healing either with ourselves or with our clients, we're at a higher vibrational level, where like negativity is more dense, it's darker, it's deep, and it's not functioning at that higher level. So when we deal with love, it's the most profound emotion in our whole world, and it's an emotion that allows us to communicate not only with loved ones but with any spiritual entity that we ask for. And it's a wonderful experience to just live our life with love.
Yeah, well said. Here's to love. I agree. And I think, we all want love. And I also really appreciated in your book how you mentioned that loving yourself, that was a key component. And that seems to be something that I've discovered in my life personally, also professionally working with clients. It seems to be a core issue when we really get behind what's going on. And we're both energy healing practitioners. And it does seem that those limitations or blocks in the energy system or the consciousness can be where that is blocked, where love or that energy is blocked. I want to just revisit back a little bit around the shamanic journeying. I'm trained in something and teach something called guided imagery, which is really just a term that really does come from the shamanic traditions, as well as energy healing does as well, when the priest was the doctor as well, or the spiritual leader was also the one who helped with medicine or with healing. And so I just really appreciate what you say about being able to go on these journeys, which is interesting because in the guided imagery that I'm trained in, there's many different types of techniques to help people to connect. So would you say that that's something that through that shamanic journeying is something that helped you to be able to continue to facilitate connecting with your brother or other loved ones?
Yes, and guided imagery is awesome. You know, there's all sorts of modalities that deal with energy, because when people pass, you know, if we are, which I fully believe, spiritual beings living in a physical body, when we pass, we're left with the energy. So the energy remains. And so when we're trying to communicate with loved ones, or we're trying to heal ourselves, or we're trying to express love, we're left with that spiritual component, or we're left with that energy that is available to us, within us and around us. And whatever complementary health modality works, it's essentially all the same. It's just a different technique for getting to the end result of love. So guided imagery, shamanic journeying, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, any of those, healing touch, Reiki, any of those, or whatever works, yoga, whatever works to help a client or ourselves relax, is just going to facilitate more self-healing. And I never knew who I was. Like I had no idea who I was. Like people would tell me things about myself and I'd think, well, that's interesting. I had no idea. But this exploration has caused a humongous awareness of what my skills are, what I'm not very good at, how I can facilitate the tremendous power of love throughout our world, which is what I love to do. I love empowering people to take control of their life. And so whatever form of modality works is going to be right for that person. There's no one way.
Yeah, absolutely. And really behind all of this is consciousness, or where we put our focus, our attention, or the state of consciousness that we're in, would you say?
Yes. And gosh, Emmy, you're so fun to talk with. I was honored, it was about 2 months ago, to be a speaker at the International Association of Near-Death Studies Annual Conference. And it was out in Seattle. And I was talking about after-death communication. And there's a lot of research now. Now, before I go into the research, I just want to say, this conference was filled with 400 physicians, neuroscientists, researchers, and a third of the people were what they call experiencers, of which I was. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm actually an experiencer. And an experiencer meant that you either had a near-death experience, an NDE, or a spiritual transformative experience, which is what I did, an STE. So you have, and what they're finding is that consciousness is separate from the brain. And we've always thought, like in neuro classes and in all sorts of medical training, I've always thought, and I think most of us have thought, that our consciousness is embedded in the brain. And when the brain dies, the consciousness ceases to exist. Well, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of research studies now that talk about consciousness being separate from the brain. And the classic speaker these days is Dr. Eben Alexander, who's a neuroscientist, definitely did not believe in the afterlife. And he had brain meningitis in both lobes, flatlined essentially with his brain, but he had this humongous near-death experience. And he now is quite a proponent for talking about the fact that our consciousness continues to live even though our brain may have ceased existence. And what they're finding out is that people that have had near-death experiences and or spiritual transformative experiences is that the resultant characteristics are very, very similar. Bruce Grayson is the founder, one of the founders of the International Association in Near-Death Studies. He's a retired professor. Dr. Bruce Grayson at University of Virginia. He has a scale, Grayson scale of near-death experience characteristics. And they're finding a huge similarity with people that have had these, which again validates the concept that consciousness is separate from the mind. And one of the things that happens is that people who've had these experiences are not afraid to die because they realize that life continues forever. They're filled with an extraordinary amount of love. They're also extremely kind, very generous, very altruistic, like way above the normal society. And it's a wonderful way to be. And so it's been really exciting to have the research now that says consciousness is separate from the mind.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for highlighting that. And that seems to be everything I've been reading and the experiences I've had for many years myself as an intuitive and energy healing practitioner who's also have had spiritual transformative experiences, guided others who've had these experiences, that it really is beautiful to know that we can connect more with that state of love. And I believe the number one fear is fear of death. And so what a gift. I mean, what a gift to connect with a previous living, physical living loved one, and also to not fear dying, which not everybody does have that fear, but it's predominant. And also people having fear of how they will die and things of that nature as well. So, and you're really connected with this community. And so if we can just connect back with Reiki for a little bit, through this journey, then you at some point decided it was important to become certified in Reiki. What was your impetus for that? And how has that helped you with communicating with your brother and others and assisting others over the years?
I love this question. Thank you, Emmy. And I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh yes, let's talk about Reiki. So that first year after my brother passed, I am experiencing all sorts of realities that I had never even thought about. And Nancy, every time I would see her, which was once to twice a week for 3 to 6 hours. So we were spending quite a bit of time together. So I'd get up very early on those days and made sure I get all my work done. But anyway, she would give me Reiki. And there was a state-of-the-art holistic conference being put on by Michael Peasy, Dr. Michael Peasy, occupational therapist. And he used to be the president of the New York State Association. And I knew him because I was president of the Delaware OT State Association. And so we became friends. And he did this wonderful 3-day conference for physicians, psychologists, social workers, physiatrists, like all the main neuroscientists, all the main players. And during the conference, there was Reiki training by an occupational therapist named Anne Marie McClintock. And so the fact that Reiki was being taught by an OT, I'm like, okay, this must be all right. I love being an OT. And so I learned OT from Anne Marie McClintock and thanked Michael so very much for introducing me to this whole realm. And what Reiki does is it raises our vibrational level. And so our vibrational level is now raised, which helps us heal ourselves so that we heal all our components, emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, the whole bit. We can heal ourselves. And when we provide Reiki with our clients, and I say that because it's not that we heal our clients, everybody heals themselves. And so what we do is provide the energy. Reiki is considered universal life energy. We provide the energy with intention. We always ask if it's okay to do this. We always ask permission from the client. And the client then, if they say yes, their own body absorbs this Reiki energy that we all have, universal life energy, and it starts the healing process. And so it's another way to empower clients and empower ourselves to reach the highest level of energetic performance.
Wonderful. So your brother passed. How soon was it before you got certified in Reiki? I mean, you were doing all these sessions with Nancy, and then something clicked for you and said, I want to learn how to do this myself, or?
I think it was about 4 to 6 months. And the fact that it was being done by an OT was another validation for me, because I was getting a little far out there, and I knew I was, but I never felt better. And it made sense. For the first time, living on this earth made sense. And so it wasn't too far along when I became Reiki certified. And there's essentially 3 different levels. Reiki 1, which you can actually learn in 1 day, which once I learned it, I'm like, this can't be right. Like, how can you learn something this profound in one day? But you can learn Reiki 1 in one day, and you can learn Reiki 2 in one day. Now, some people take a couple of days, but essentially, like the way I teach it, you can learn it in 6 hours. And you know, I really did doubt it for a couple of years, and I've used it a little bit. You learn self-healing first and such. And then I really started to use it, but it took me 10 years of pretty consistent use before I thought, all right, I would really believe this philosophy. I love the precepts, and I would like to become a Reiki Master, which you can also learn in one day. Reiki Master usually does take a little longer, but you can learn it very quickly. Then there are all these specialties that you can choose to do, but essentially Reiki can be learned rapidly. And if people are looking to communicate with their loved ones, or to have a more complete control of their own healing, I highly recommend Reiki. The way I'm teaching it for at least the medical professions is that if we're doing it as part of our therapy session, I usually recommend only about a 5-minute treatment of Reiki, because we always want to do it as part of the treatment session. We can't, if we do it as the whole thing, then it's not considered therapy. But if we can just do it for part of it, and it's part of, for OT, if it would be part of an occupation-based treatment, then we're providing either the preparation or the occupation or the skill or the activity with Reiki and with the client's approval. And the results have been extraordinary. It's really been quite exciting. Again, we always want to get permission. And when we do it with children learn very fast. I always say, please ask the parents, make sure it's okay. We want to make sure culturally and ethically, you know, it's fine for the child or for the client to be able to receive this. And it's been extraordinary. In the last 6 weeks, I've taught, gosh, it's like 146 medical professionals Reiki level 1. And it's been astounding to see the speed of which people are learning this skill.
Beautiful. Yeah, because when we're using Reiki or other types of energy healing techniques, which it's interesting because I know Reiki is a term, but when I look at like healing touch, and I was trained in Qigong, but then learned the chakra system, to me, they're all very similar, really, if not the same thing, because we're all working with the same human energy system and consciousness, but there might be slightly different techniques or sort of similar, but some slight variations. So I also, well, thank you for sharing this light and love, really, because that's what energy healing is, and Reiki, right, is sharing light and love to so many people who are yearning for this. And having been a practitioner who uses this, I use this in my practice, but also when I used to work in an integrative medicine program in Minneapolis at a major hospital in an outpatient, we used energy healing there. And it was really significant how we could get pain and anxiety and stress levels down, and really how it can help with relaxation for many people. I was even part of a study at the time there. So, and there are more studies coming out on Reiki. And I also want to say thank you and congratulate you for this being the 5th year that you're going to be teaching Reiki at the American OT Association.
Oh, it is unbelievable. Thank you, Emmy. And I love what you said about all forms of complementary modalities. You know, the final nut for me that was facilitated was when it was right before the first year, 2015, when I started teaching Reiki at the American OT Association. I was really concerned about writing this book and talking about the fact that I'm an occupational therapist, and I didn't want everybody who read this book to think all OTs talked with dead people. Like, that is not the message that I want to give.
Although maybe someday that will be the case.
I don't know. Well, maybe more, but
one can only hope.
One can. So I'm standing in front of at an AOTA conference, American OT Annual Conference, and there was a poster by Anne Marie Hansen, occupational therapist, who's a faculty member at Duquesne, and it was called Spirituality. And I'd heard about the word, but I had no idea what it was. And I looked at that poster and I thought, oh my gosh, there is a place for what had happened with me. And that's when I decided to submit the proposal the first proposal that I've ever submitted on Reiki to the American OT Conference, and it got accepted. And I spent like dozens of hours having all the rationale for why it was relevant and all that. And the fact that it's going to be taught again 5 years in a row at AOTA Annual Conference in New Orleans this March is just wonderful. And it's been so fun. And I'm so appreciative for AOTA for really approving this whole thing. It's a blind review. And gosh, I just found out. So I'm filled with joy.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And of course, many people are listening to this likely, for those who are occupational therapists, that spirituality definitely is within our scope of practice. And for all healthcare practitioners and even people who are not, if you feel a draw to develop your spirituality, you know, do like what Becky did. Go read some books, check out at a library, have conversations with people, and that it's really can help with health outcomes and really just help us with who we are, you know, whatever your belief system is. And we all have our own unique way of looking at things. So, you know, discovering what is meaningful for you is really essential and important and can really lift you to new spirits, to more joy and peace and love in your life as well. And one of the things that I really appreciate you putting in your book, Becky, is showing how some of your experiences could actually be validated. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years for people who are skeptics, and it's okay to be skeptical, right? To check things out. And I was a skeptic once myself, but that, you know, to go ahead and to just recognize that there are sometimes ways that we can communicate. And that I also just wanted to share before I forget that it's interesting. I first learned about energy healing from a couple of physical therapists after work one day as well. So, but at any rate, that people can communicate, and that belief is really important. And that one of the things that I hear from the skeptics is, oh, people are just making it up, or you're just making it up in your head, or it's just your imagination. But one of the things I've noticed, having taught intuitive development for a number of years and worked in these realms and so forth, is that it's very uncanny, and the experiences and how they really are linked. And I recently got to interview Dean Radin, who is the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, who's been studying this for 4 decades now. And these are legitimate experiences that we all can have, and they are very normal and common. Some people, it's just what they do with it. Some people will dismiss it. Somebody such as yourself, I mean, some people might have said, oh, I hallucinated, right? And then they might maybe go see a mental health doctor, where for you it was, wow, this is a beautiful experience. And I even know in your book you checked out like, well, I'm here. I know my name. I know what day it is. Because you're an OT, you know how to like make sure you're oriented to time and place. And but I think that is a very important component in healthcare, and even with people with mental health conditions, that we do, you know, check out what's happening for them, or people with cognitive impairment. I have my own mother and mother-in-law both have Alzheimer's disease right now, and it's fascinating because they are still in there. And my mother recently shared that she pointed to her shoulder and said, my mom is right here. So, you know, even though somebody might have cognitive impairment, that there are some of these experiences that can still be happening, or even in a transitory state from this physical realm to another realm. So I just want to mention that. And I know that also for me, not unlike you, I've had enough experiences that it is validated for me. So, well, we just have a few minutes left. So I just want to ask, how can people, are you teaching people now how to communicate with loved ones? I know you're teaching Reiki, but do you also teach another course in this?
I do. Yes, I have, it's on my website, and it's free, and it's an online course, and it's called Rebecca's After Death Communication Course. And people just need to go to the website, which is just my name. It is sort of a long name, which is Rebecca Austill-Clausen.com. And on the homepage, upper right-hand corner, it says, sign up, Rebecca's After Death Communication Course. And what it is it's 7 modules that come out every 4 days, and there's all sorts of links in there. And it really goes through the process of how we can get ready to communicate with our loved ones. And It's really been such a life-changing experience for me to be able to have these continuing relationships. And my goal is to let people to know that if they want to do this, as you said, we do need to believe. We need to believe. And then there are resources out there. So yes, that's a solid way to learn. Receiving Reiki also, and it doesn't mean just when you get Reiki every single time you're going to communicate with loved ones. That does happen to be a possibility, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be communicating. Reiki is such a wonderful self-healer. It does, as you said, reduce stress and pain and anxiety, and it's very good for cancer. And you know, Emmy, when you were talking about Alzheimer's, they're doing this cool research study now with people who have Alzheimer's, and they're putting Reiki in the clients. And this is like with moderate to severe Alzheimer's, and they're putting Reiki in the client's hands. And then every time that they touch themselves, they're giving themselves Reiki, and they've noticed a really nice reduction in overt behaviors, in excessive walking, in increased control, less anxiety. And so that's been a really nice byproduct of using Reiki with people that have Alzheimer's. And so it's really been fun to share what diagnoses are especially receptive to reduction in pain, stress, and anxiety, and help with that inner healing process.
Oh, that's beautiful. And yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you. What a gift for sharing your course at no cost at this point. And I think that is such a gift. So yes, definitely go to Rebecca Austill-Clausen.com and check that out. And thank you so much for sharing around the energy with those who, I'll just put in quotes, have cognitive impairment, because that's kind of how we term it. But there still is a conscious being there who still has a lot of love to give and receive themselves if they are also treated in that regard. Also, I love that about how they can have the energy in their hands and touching themselves. And I also know that there's a study that came out that those who have cognitive impairment and the caregivers can benefit from mindfulness meditation. And I know when I used to work at the hospital, I do it here in my own private practice, but a lot of the folks I work with now, I'm doing a lot more prevention and wellness, and definitely dealing with people with stress, anxiety, depression, things like that. But at the hospital, you know, people would generally be in the bed, but I would actually teach a lot of caregivers how to provide energy healing, because they wanted to do something for their loved one and they didn't know what to do. And I'm sure you've done that. And I think that that's a really beautiful way that we can translate the skill. You know, there's a self-healing, providing it to others. And then also if you have a loved one or a child, helping them in that regard too. So it's absolutely wonderful. So in addition to the AOTA conference, are you doing your own courses as well?
Yes.
For Reiki?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's really been very exciting. I started at AOTA. Well, before I did AOTA, I was doing them all my own and just working this out and having a wonderful time training general practitioners. And then I decided to concentrate on OTs. And last fall, Duquesne University had me come and teach all their fourth-year students, OT students, and they paid. They did the conference. It was a 2-day workshop. One day I did students, and the next day it was with the Pennsylvania OT Association, and it was so fun. There were like 70 people that got trained in one weekend in Reiki, and I thought, gosh, maybe there are other universities that would like to have this happen. And so in the last 6 months, I think I've been to 6 or 7 university programs. And so I've been concentrating on occupational therapy and physical therapy, but I'm soon going to move into nursing and the entire medical professional realm, because it's all relevant. And it's been really, really exciting. So that's happening as well. And I also teach at state conferences, whatever discipline there is. And so it's a 6-hour course, but with a couple of breaks, it's goes to 6.5. Or if you have lunch, it goes a little bit longer. But it's a 1-day course, and it's been received really well. So it's been a blast, absolute blast. And the evals are outstanding. It's really amazing. And I'm just so honored to be able to teach this complementary health modality to so many medical professionals. It's been wonderful.
Yes, it's beautiful. Well, you're raising the vibration of the roof with love and a higher vibration of healing energy. Who doesn't love that? So we need to wind down in just a moment here. What do you feel you've learned in the last 20 years or so of practicing and teaching in these spiritual dimensions?
Oh my gosh, I've learned everything. I feel what's happening right now. My whole life has been geared towards this time frame. I'm so filled with gratitude, Emmy. It's almost overwhelming. Once you start to pay attention to healing yourself, you become in the flow, and synchronistic events keep happening, particularly if you have an idea of what direction you want to go in. And so I'm filled with gratitude, and that probably is the biggest take home for me, is that love is predominant in my life. I'm filled with gratitude. I'm extremely grateful for my brother passing, which sounds like a curious thing, but I never would have learned any of this. And he's been continually with me for years. And it's been a wonderful experience. I thank you for asking about that. And I thank you for this interview, and thank you for being so smart. And it's just wonderful.
Well, thank you, Becky. And it's clear that you are in quite a positive state. And I know that that is something that a lot of people are wanting. And that you mentioned being in a state of gratitude and a state of love. Don't you think that's what a lot of people, the folks you come across, do you feel that that's what a lot of people are searching for and want more of, would you say?
Sure. And I did, but I had no idea how to get it. I didn't know who I was. I was bored. I couldn't figure it out.
You said you were a workaholic, and that you were would set goals, work harder, meet your goals, set more goals, work harder, meet your goals. It was like continually, but you were very successful in like the traditional sense of, right, in the business world, clearly.
Right. And so I would keep climbing that mountain, because I kept having the mountain get higher and higher and higher, but I was always climbing. And now, quite frankly, I feel like I'm on the top and just enjoying the view and sharing the love. And it's been magnificent. And it's a blast. It's a blast. It's been real fun.
I'm so happy for you, and thank you for all the love you're sharing with everybody. And is there anything else you would like to share with those who might be watching or listening today?
You know, I do have one concept, and it's a new concept that's getting a fair amount of press these days, and it's called forest bathing. And forest bathing started in Japan, which is actually where the current Yasui method of natural healing for Reiki started. And what's happening is Japanese physicians are starting to write prescriptions for forest bathing, meaning they're encouraging people who are filled with stress and anxiety to go into the forest and be mindful in the forest. And in Japan, and now it's coming into the United States, they actually have guides that can help you be mindful and just be present in the moment. Now, forest bathing is not like going for a hike. You don't have a goal. You just want to go into the forest. The trees release wonderful healing energy. And they're starting to do studies of cortisol, which is the stress enzyme. And they're taking little saliva, bits of saliva from the tongue, and they're getting a cortisol analysis at the beginning of forest bathing, and then at the end of forest bathing they're repeating that, and they're finding statistically significant results of reduction in stress and anxiety for being present and mindful in the forest. So if people are looking to be calmer and receive a sense of peace and joy and happiness and healing, I encourage going into the forest and just being present without a goal, just being mindful of what's around you. And an average forest bathing experience is 2 hours. It can last a lot shorter, it can last longer, but it's a wonderful, quick way to be with a tree and experience the healing benefits of forest bathing.
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah, nature is such a healer. And I know you mentioned in your book how you would go out to the Christmas tree farm with your horse. I just love that imagery of imagining you, in that scene, and how beautiful you really painted a really beautiful scene of that. And yes, there is research around even seeing images of nature, or there's the grounding of being able to just go out and stand on the earth, or if you're in a place in a climate where you can take your shoes and socks off and stand right on the earth at that vibration and frequency. So I'm so grateful that you mentioned that, and it really does can get us into that present moment. Sort of, I like to think of it as like no time zone. And you had talked about that at the beginning with your father, saying that there's no time here. And so there must be something around that when we're in that space, we feel maybe at home.
Yes. Well said. Well said.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca Austill-Clausen, who also goes by Becky. I'm so grateful to know you and to talk with you today about your amazing journey and the ways that you are teaching and inspiring others. Do get yourself a copy of The Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. You will not regret it. And visit Becky at RebeccaAustill-Clausen.com. Thank you so much, Becky. Any last thoughts?
You can get Changemaker all over the place: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, indie bookstores, and I'm so thrilled. Last spring it received 3 awards, so it's all over the place. Thank you so much, Emmy. This has been really fun.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening today on the Healing Connections podcast. We'll see you next time. Be well, everybody. Bye for now.
Have a happy day.
Happy day.